As we enter the month of August, the dog days of summer are here, with the Cubs taking 2 out of 3 in Kansas City, while the White Sox take care of business, winning the last 2 games, dismantling the Cleveland Guardians on the South Side. One White Sox legend was enshrined into the White Sox Hall of Fame, while a recent star that played for the South Side has just recently announced his retirement after 10 decades in MLB. In basketball, the schedule release will be announced soon. Will the Bulls get any followers thrown their way via the national TV? In the NBA, a coaching player and revolutionary legend passes away at the age of 86. And yo, we'll have a special edition of Old School TV Monday, if you catch my drift. I'm Sid, that's LeKeena. The Monday edition of the program starts now.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Keep him on the field. And this one, a drive into left center field. Going back is Churio at the wall. Get out! For Robert Jr., his 4th of the season. And the Sox take the lead 2-1.
Armstrong gets into another one. Sends Edman back. He's watching it land in the stands. What a night from Pete Crow Armstrong. Goes wide, up the guard again. And he scores. What a play!
On Jordan Binnington, no chance at all for the Blues netminders. Connor Bedard. Wow.
Getting what a pass. Buzelis with the fade on the drive.
Uze motions left. They're blitzing. It's picked up. Caleb throws. Middle of the field. Loveland catch. Breaks away the 30. Loveland 20. Loveland 10. Loveland end zone. Touchdown Bears!
Welcome to another fun Monday extravaganza edition of the program of Second City Sports. You're locked and loaded, and we're live in living color right here on Sports Soul Chicago. Sid the Kid is me. LeKeena McGee is she. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow LeKeena McGee on the Twitter, X, and the IG.
Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms now, live in the living color. Please hype the video so we can get this content out to as many of you beautiful people as we can, so we can be the #1 destination for Chicago and national sports talk. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We're on the podcast, regular fun, and we have very definite opinions. If you have any definite opinion during our 2-hour extravaganza, we call it Sports Talk Radio Show. You got to hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions and comments in the comment section. LeKeena will get the up on the screen for you. But if you decide to troll and or do something silly, dumb, or stupid, I'll give LeKeena full powers to give you dumbos to build and be boot.
Toodles.
But before we begin, shout out to our live game. That's LIVE, live entertainment game. That's checking us out live and in living color right now at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels at 12:21 p.m. Central Standard Time. But as always, much love to the replay gang that's checking us out on the replay, also at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels. Don't you ever forget our motto where we talk sports, music, or entertainment. We will always provide.
We invite you to the best here on Second City Sports. Of course, as we get into the second Monday of August, we go back to music for the special edition of Old School TV Monday. We'll have recaps of this past weekend's Pro Football Hall of Fame ceremony, and also who is eligible for perhaps maybe being a first timer next year. Also, some sports media news and. And also, some updates from NFL and Bears training camp as the Bears lose another one of their top players to injury, and other teams have been losing players as well. And as we gear for the first full week of preseason action in the NFL, but first to the diamond we go as the Cubs get 2 out of 3 against Kansas City. They took care of business, including winning the rubber match yesterday, 10-2. Ian Happ and Miguel Amaya each had a home run. Matthew Boyd definitely making the case for. I don't know if he'll end up having a Cy Young, but he's definitely been pitching very well as of late. We'll get to that in a second here, but. You could probably say, the Royal, they should have swept the Royals, but Clay Holmes, not his best first game since being traded to the Cubs. But even still, they took care of business. They get 2 out of 3. They're still atop the wild card. They're also still 5.5 back of the Brewers. So, say, what do you think about Cubs Royals series?
They like you said, it should have been a sweep, but as expected, they took care of business, winning 2 out of 3 from the bad Kansas City Royals. Everything is starting to come together now for this kind of thing. Besides the health, but on the field first, the starting pitching has been tremendous. You mentioned Matthew Boyd. He didn't have the greatest stat line yesterday because he was backed up by that tremendous offense that scored 10 runs. But Matthew Boyd was still decent. 7 innings pitched, 5 hits given up, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. Kevin Gausman, one of the trade line acquisitions that GM Jet Hoyer made last week. He pitched in his Cubs debut last Friday. 7 innings pitched, 4 strikeouts, 1 walk, only giving up 4 hits and 2 earned runs. That was very impressive for his Cubs debut. And you can tell that this Cubs offense fed off that energy, beating the Kansas City Royals in that series opening game last Friday. I want to talk about a couple of guys that came through in that World Series. I know Nico Horner was 0 for 5 last Friday, but he heated up in the last 2 games of that series. And we talked about this for the last few weeks. He needs to be one of those cornerstone guys that need to come through with his bat. He's been solid all year defensively, but he's starting to come through these last 2 or 3 weeks with his bat. Michael Bush, who's been struggling so far this year, he's been coming through with his bat, and he had a tremendous series over the weekend in Kansas City. Dansby Swanson, not so much, but you could tell that he's starting to come on a little bit. We talked about him last week on the show. Of course, what more can we say about Pete Crow Armstrong? Yes, in my opinion, he is the leading vote getter in the clubhouse for National League MVP. And so you have guys like that setting the table. That effect possibly trickles down to the other guys. Let's not forget about Alex Bregman as well. He's been swinging a hot stick too.
Yeah, they're getting contributions from everybody on that team, and not just the pitching, but also the hitting. I mean, Kevin Goss with a solid debut. His first game with the Cubs. His game just being traded from Toronto. He had 7 sharp innings in that Friday matchup. Of course, the bullpen made a little bit interesting, probably a little bit too interesting, I would think. I kind of feel like Theo Bar should be sent down, but again, what do I know? But yeah, that made it closer than it should have been. But look, it is what it is. I mean, I think you just take care of business against Kansas City. You get to face the Nationals. I know the Nationals, they did sweep the Reds, but they kind of been falling back to earth since the last time you played them. So you should be able to win 2 out of 3 in DC. So I think if you're the Cubs, you gotta be feeling good of where you're at right now. Folks are starting to find their rhythm. Guys are coming back from injuries. They're finding their rhythm. The bullpen, for the most part, has been really good. Here are your matchups for they're off tonight, but they don't start playing the Nationals until tomorrow. But Shoto, who's had a very solid last couple of starts, he faces Jake Irvin. David Peterson, who's had a solid last start, he faces Miles Mikolas in the Wednesday, and on the rubber match on Thursday. Of course, you got Gossman again against Case Cavalli. So probably their best pitcher. So I know he definitely kind of shut the door on the last time they played. But like I said, the Nationals have fallen back there. They did trade a couple of their top younger guys. So I'll say they should be able to win 2 out of 3, and hopefully they can get going in their showdown against St. Louis. I think the key is just don't get caught looking ahead to St. Louis. And if you're the Cubs, I think that's where you want to be.
You're listening to Second City Sports on Chicago City. LeKeena hanging out here with you on our second Monday show for the month of August, talking Chicago Cubs as we open up the show. They take 2 out of 3 from the Kansas City Royals, including winning the series yesterday in the series finale 10-2 over the struggling Kansas City Royals. I want to hit on that Cubs bullpen with just a moment. Of course, you're going to get Daniel Palencia back at some point. He's in a rehab start right now in the state of Iowa on the AAA squad, but you mentioned about Caleb Theobar not having a good series against Kansas City, but The other guys we talked about in that bullpen, like Jacob Webb and Ryan Zephyr John, who I want to focus in on, who they also picked up uh, from the Anaheim Angels at the trade deadline. This guy could throw close to 100 miles an hour. In his only inning pitched yesterday, he gave up only one hit, but he struck out two. If Daniel Palencia struggles after he comes back from his injury rehab start, you can plug this guy in. You can make a small case with Jacob Webb as well, but Ryan Severjohn is going to be a key, in my opinion, to that Cubs bullpen, especially when we get down to the end of the regular season and in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, Zephyr John, I think, was one of the steals from the trade deadline, and I think he's definitely going to be a big factor here as the Cubs go into the stretch run, this playoff run. So, of course, one of the top middle relievers in the National League. Of course, he'll come from the D-backs. So I think he's definitely going to be that guy that you make a case, especially if he keeps it up. And of course, Valencia struggles. I think he'd definitely be that bullpen guy. We'll see. But I feel like the Cubs are kind of like in a good spot right now. In this whole thing, like I said, going into the chase, you can't worry about what Milwaukee's doing. We'll talk about what they did after the break. But if you're the Cubs, look, you've got, like I said, you got the Nationals, you got St. Louis. You're able to, hopefully you can keep up what you did to St. Louis a couple weeks ago. They, of course, you got the White Sox. We'll talk about them after the break. Then they got Seattle. Then they got Arizona. And then Cincy, you get 7 against Milwaukee. So I think you'll just take care of your business, do what you need to do, beat the teams you're supposed to beat, and then just hopefully by the time you do face Milwaukee in a couple of weeks, you can in a few weeks you can kind of, this could definitely very well be for that division, the NL Central.
Yeah, like I said, it's easier said than done, but this is why we call it the dog days of summer, right? In the month of August of baseball, because on paper, like you said, you just mentioned out a couple of opponents have really gotten it together as of late. We'll talk about them following this bottom of the hour timeout. But on paper, if you're a good team like the Cubs are, they started to turn it around here, you're supposed to beat the bad teams like you did in Kansas City, and hopefully you could do against Washington on the road again starting tomorrow. Then you go 500 against the good teams. You can do that. Those are signs of a good team. But like you said, look here, we've seen it in baseball, especially we could talk about the month of September when we get there. But during the dog days of August, you get a few days off, a day off there in between. You're playing about 2, sometimes a 3-week stretch without a day off. That's really going to test a character of teams. And the Cubs are going through that right now. We'll talk about the White Sox, you mentioned, following this timeout. But for the Cubs, like you say, you don't want to get caught looking ahead towards a big weekend series against St. Louis. The St. Louis has been tough on the Cubs this year, but take care of business against Washington. Hopefully you don't have any more injuries. Just stay the course. Like you said, keep winning series, and you'll be right there for the division. They are a playoff team. They stay healthy, but take care of business against Washington and let the chips fall where they may afterwards.
We'll talk about the White Sox coming up after the break as they honored Isaac Ian. They're also going to be honoring one of their recent stars. We'll talk about that coming up next.
Got it done here. Ouch! And we're gonna make sure you lit this time. Ouch! You're not gonna get me this time.
Ow, Manny!
Whoops! Let's try an easy one.
Every day, we take steps to keep the people we love safe, but some health risks are easy to miss. Ticks hiding in the yard can spread germs, like the ones that cause Lyme disease. Mice searching for food can spread bacteria that makes us sick. Mosquitoes lay eggs in standing water and can spread West Nile virus and more. Cockroaches are drawn to water in the home, leaving behind allergens that can trigger asthma attacks. Common pests can threaten our health. Learn how to protect your family at pestworld.org.
Hey, this is Corey McGee, and I listen to Sean and Maya on the morning show.
Welcome back to Second City Sports on another Monday extravaganza edition. You're locked and loaded, and we're live in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. Sid the Kid is me. LeKeena McGee is she. Excuse me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow Matt Keenan McGee on the Twitter. Here's again IG.
As we continue the baseball talk, discussing the White Sox and the best and worst from Major League Baseball from this past weekend. If you have any questions or comments regarding those subjects in the world of baseball, you got to hit us up right now at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comment section. LeKeena will get the opening screen for you.
We'll do the White Sox on the field first, but they did honor Ozzie Guillen in a ceremony on Saturday. They did come back and beat the Guardians to win that game and to tie the series. They did win the rubber match, winning that series 2 out of 3, including this one yesterday. And it was basically thanks to Colson Montgomery's 3-run home run. They increased their lead to 3.5, which is, look, I know people want to say, oh my God, that's the biggest lead. Yes, it's their biggest lead this year, but it's not insurmountable. So I would advise White Sox fans to, you haven't won anything yet. You still got another team that's nipping at your heels. And also, I wouldn't cut out the Guardians yet either. I'm just saying, but we'll get to that in a bit here. But there's this whole thing with the White Sox. Look, they've done it all. I mean, Tristan Peters came in. This guy, his first home run in that game on Saturday. His first home run since the All-Star break. Anthony Kay had another solid outing on Saturday. They lost a tough one on Friday, but again, you win 2 out of 3 against Cleveland. Like I said, I know. Yes, I know you're done playing Cleveland, but I think until next month. But I still say they're still gonna be a big factor in that division. You need to play Cincy. I know Cincy, they've been up and down. You don't get caught looking ahead to that series against Detroit. We'll talk about them in a second. You're getting Cincy at the right time because they got swept by the Nats. So, I think the White Sox you're in a good spot. But like I said, you haven't won anything yet.
Let's start with the bad first. Last Friday, the series opener against Cleveland, besides Ja Rule not showing up to that concert, that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother time. Will Venable coming out immediately following his pitching coach in that top of the first inning. Noah Schultz, who's had his struggles so far this year, the rookie left-hander, claimed that he didn't know the rule about coming out of the dugout. When you come out following your pitching coach or any of your coaches, that means you're supposed to take your pitcher out of the game. Of course, Noah Schultz exited the game out early last Friday. I think, in my opinion, that was a cover-up because Noah Schultz was getting killed, no pun intended, by the Guardians. The Guardians put a couple runs on the board in that first inning, and that carried their momentum for them winning the long game of that series. The starting pitcher, as we talked about for this White Sox team, outside of Anthony Kay, who we mentioned had a hell of a performance last Saturday, is Sean Burke. The rest of the starting pitcher has been bad over the last few weeks. Yesterday, before the rain delay, Davis Martin, who I was vouching for to get into the All-Star game, well, he's been struggling since the month of June, and he was getting ready to get shelled again. Of course, the 2-hour rain delay came, of course, after the rain delay was over. Hagen Smith made his debut, got into a little bit of trouble, but he got out of it. But the starting pitching must be addressed. LeKeena, that's why I said I wanted the Sox to get an additional starting pitcher at the deadline. They didn't do that. So, with results of the bad, Noah Schultz along with David Sandling were sent down to Charlotte. Hagen Smith and Tanner McDougal were called up. Now, Will Hagen Smith be a starter and filled in that starting rotation? That remains to be seen. Eric Freddie, I assume, will go back into that starting rotation, while Tanner McDougal will come out of the bullpen. LeKeena, the White Sox have slugged their way out of many problems this year, and they've overcome many obstacles. But their starting pitcher needs to tighten up. Needs to tighten up outside of Anthony Kane and Sean Burke.
Well, I think that's really going to be the thing. Yes, you could they were able to slug their way out. Let's be honest, they slugged their way out those last couple of games against Cleveland. But unfortunately, that's not going to do it if you're trying to win, win your division. Look, you got Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
you got the Cubs again. You have to get that makeup game against Atlanta now that Acuna's back, so there's a totally different team now. Then you get Texas, then you get Minnesota multiple times, then you got Pittsburgh, and also Detroit again. So this is not going to be an easy stretch for the White Sox, and I think that for people that want to give the White Sox the division now, I think people need to slow it down because if you can't get your starting pitching going, that's going to be a thing here. Now, speaking of Sean Burke, he'll be on the bump tomorrow against Nick Lodolo. And of course, speaking of Luis Castillo, of course, who had a solid outing last week against his first game against Boston, he gets his first home start in Cincy. He'll face Red Louder. And no word, Will Whittle has not announced who's going to start for that rubber match on Thursday, but whoever, I guess it's going to be a bullpen game. They'll face Andrew Abbott. So there's no reason why they can't at least win the series, if not sweep the Reds. But again, you never know this White Sox team. They could slug their way out of it, but that's not going to work if you're trying to win the division. So now, as far as the rest of that division is concerned, like I said, well, we'll get to the Tim Anderson in a second here. But as far as the rest of that division, look, 3.5 is nothing. I mean, look, I would be more impressed if they were up by maybe 5.5 or even 7.5, like the Dodgers are. I just don't. I know if the playoffs started today, they would have a bye. I'm talking about the White Sox. Well, that's why it's August 10th. It's not September 10th. So we still got about 7 weeks left in the season. So for me, I'm just like taking one series at a time for the White Sox. You'll have your shot against your division foes in these next couple of months. I'm in improvement mode for the White Sox. I didn't raise my expectations. I know you have, Sid. I haven't. So I would say prove to me that you can hang in there with the big boys. You passed the test so far, but again, this is when you start, getting to see what these teams are made of. So we'll see if what's this White Sox team is made of once they start this stretch, coming up.
And let's not forget, at the end of May, going into the month of June, they trailed the Guardians by 4 games. So, like you said, things could turn in a tide just like that as we now enter into the month of August. I want to speak going also to the defense. I know Braden Montgomery in yesterday's game had a bad error in right field, which helped Cleveland get to those 2 runs before they ran delayed. The defense has to tighten up as well. I know they've been better, but at times, the mental mistakes has really cost this team games here and there all year, along with some of the blundering base running at times as well. So that has to tighten up as well. I want to quickly touch in on the Isaac Guillen ceremony. I know it ran a little bit long, and the game on Saturday didn't start until 6:30. Me personally, I'm glad that the White Sox, in particular Isaac Guillen, stuck it to Fox, because you know as well as I do, LeKeena, this goes for all your sports, but it's a fully national televised broadcast. They get to control everything. And even though this game was originally supposed to be on CHSN at the start of the year, Fox took it away because they saw the White Sox were good, and they think they're going to be in this playoff chase, division chase. I'm glad, me personally, I'm glad that the White Sox stuck it to Fox, making that game start 20 minutes late. But to the actual ceremony for Isaac, it was a beautiful ceremony. I had a chance to be there, witnessing it all. He thanked Jerry Reinsdorf. He thanked some of his former teammates that were there. A couple of them weren't there. He thanked the workers and on the White Sox, from the ushers to the security people. Of course, he thanked the fans. Of course, he thanked his family and praised his not just his own children, but his grandchildren as well. Isaac Guillen represents the South Side culture, represents the common man. He was thankful to everyone has played a part in his life, and that's why he's going to be remembered forever among White Sox fans.
I'm just glad he kept the swearing to a minimum. So good for him for not using a lot of swear words. I'm proud of him for that. So that was actually really because of course it was televised for a little bit on Fox. So I'm glad he kept it there. But yeah, I mean, I think he definitely showed why he is so beloved by that White Sox organization. So Well done by him, and well done by that crew with the White Sox. Now they'll be honoring another one of their more recent stars, if you will, Tim Anderson, who officially announced his retirement about a little over an hour ago after 10 seasons. Most of it with the White Sox. They'll actually be honoring him in a special pregame ceremony on Thursday, September 17th. So get your tickets now if you guys haven't got your tickets already for that one. So, it is a nice little showing by him. I know they didn't leave on the best of terms, but again, look, we with sports, there's usually a weird way of kind of like you're
Hmm.
reuniting, little whatever little like things going on behind the scenes and such. So good on the White Sox and Tim Anderson for coming back together, and now they're going to be honoring him with a ceremony coming up on the 17th of next month.
Yeah, he was the face of the White Sox during his last rebuild with the ex-executives Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn. Of course, Tim Anderson was the face of the White Sox franchise between 2019 and 2021. Of course, he was a multi-year All-Star. 2019, I believe, batting champion. Of course, uh, how ironic that the 5-year anniversary of the game against the Yankees in Iowa is took place 5 years ago this week against the Yankees in that special game in Iowa. I forgot what it's called, but I don't care. But you guys know what I'm talking in the Field of Dreams game. Thank you. In the Field of Dreams game, and that was I know many people will argue that was his last greatest moment in a White Sox uniform. So, but Tim Anderson brought that attitude. He brought that swag, as the kids would say, onto the South Side. It was infectious among his teammates. It got the whole city going. It got the whole White Sox fan base going. But when they started to lose and things started to go along a lot of those players, he was one of them that when things didn't go well, the finger was pointed at him. I thought that when, like you said, when all things were said and done, when he was traded away, he handled it with class. We know a couple of things that happened off the field. We won't talk about that. That's not the time. But what he did on the field, they were starting something. Of course, he was part of that division winning team in 2021. Before they lost to the Houston Astros in the playoffs, he was the leader of that team. He was one of the not just one of the future stars of baseball. He was the face of baseball at that time. So it's just like I said, the story didn't end the way we as Sox fans wanted it to end, but he still made a big impact on the franchise, and I'm glad him and the Sox have patched things up, and he's going to get his proper treatment.
Yeah, so we'll see during that ceremony coming up on the September 17th. I just can see sports on sports. Got LeKeena McGee sitting around with you. Moving right along. We'll go into the rest of baseball. We'll see in the AL Central. Don't look now, but the Tigers are right there at 3.5. They won 2 out of 3 in San Francisco. Yes, they traded Scooble. Yes, they traded Mize. But look, Jackson Jobe had a solid start. Um, they've got guys that have been doing their thing. Dylan Dinger had a good series against the Giants, and a good one in the previous series against the Mariners. Also, Hong Yu Lee's go ahead single that helped take that series over the Giants. Look, I'm not going to say they're going to come back and win a division, but what they've done, especially with trading their top ace, 2 times another one of their top guys, and they've
Mhm.
been able to do so well with a lot of their younger guys stepping up. Don't forget Troy Melton has had a couple of big hits during this stretch. So, look, I'm not going to say they're going to win a division, but they're going to be a team they're going to be contended with, and no one should take them lightly.
Yeah, remember 2 years ago, Detroit was in the same position behind Cleveland, trailing big time in the AL Central. Of course, they made that big run starting in the month of August, carried over to September, and they got into the playoffs before losing to, I believe it was Cleveland in that wild card series. So, as a franchise with this group of guys, they've been in this position before. But on the flip side, turn the calendar over to a year ago, they had a big lead in the AL Central, blew it to Cleveland, got in as a wild card before bowing out to Seattle in that division series in 5 games. So the way that the Tigers are getting done right now, like you said, is about the offense, stepping. Now let's not forget about Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson, who had a good day yesterday, going 2 for 4 as well. So the Tigers are getting done offensively, but The one thing they got to shore up is Framber Valdez, as we talked about in the offseason, Lakina. He's going to be that guy in rotation, especially if they lost Scuba, which they did to the Dodgers at the trade deadline. He's going to have to step up, be that veteran like he was in Houston, and lead that starting rotation for the Tigers, along with Jack Flaherty as well. But outside of Kenley Jensen, the middle relief in that Tigers bullpen, that group has been terrible over the course of the season. Definitely the last couple of months, they need to tighten up as well if they're going to stay in this race with Chicago. And I'm still going to put Cleveland in there as well.
Yeah, well, Cleveland, like I said, I'm not counting Cleveland out either. I know Jose Ramirez has not looked good since coming back from the IL, but you got to think he'll find his rhythm. Stephen Kwan, I know he had a couple of
Mm-hmm.
big hits. We know he's the White Sox killer, so I think he'll find his rhythm too. Now Minnesota's going to be interesting. I know they lost 2 out of 3 to the Brewers. They probably should have won that game yesterday, but whatever. But yeah, look, Culpepper, who's their shortstop, who they called up. He got his first home run. Caitlin Culpepper in his debut with the Twins. They came back and beat the Brewers, which ended up being their only win of that series. So I'm not counting on Minnesota either. Like I said, the only team that you probably should count on is Kansas City. So I'm not counting nobody out in that division. So I know the White Sox got the lead right now, but look, we see what happened the last couple of years in that division. I'm not gonna, give the White Sox that division yet. They still got work that they got to do, and they got a couple of makeup games. They got one coming up on Thursday. Next week. So, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Now, going to the AL East, the Rays. I know they've won 6 straight. They swept the Mariners. I'll get to the Mariners in a second because they're getting on my nerves. Cedric Mullins had he had the go ahead home run. To cap off the sweep in that series. Camaneros looked really good. I know Drew Rasmussen had a solid outing to kick off that series on Friday. Story of 7 scoreless innings. So, looks like the Rays are starting to kind of find their groove. The Yankees are also finding their groove as well. So I know 5.5. That is a lot. But look, we've seen weirder things happen before. So I'm not gonna put the Yankees out of that division, but they really need to get their guys going.
Yeah, the Yankees took 2 out of 3 against the Atlanta Braves at home over the weekend. The rematch of the 1996 and 99 World Series matchups from back in the day. But bringing it back to the present, as we talked about basically all year since mid-May, Aaron Judge has not been in the lineup for New York, and I know some people said that he may miss the rest of the regular season and try to get come back for the playoffs. I don't think that's a good idea. But it's obviously it shows how really bad that injury that he has, that rib injury that he has, and that's not good. But as I said before, I say it again: if Aaron Judge comes back before the month of September or
Mm-hmm.
right at the beginning of the month of September, the Yankees have a shot to represent the American League. If he doesn't come back at all and his season is over, even with Ben Rice, even with Paul Goldschmidt, the veteran coming off the bench, even with Cody Bellinger, I still don't believe the Yankees cannot get out of the American League. The American League. That's why some people are quote unquote high on the White Sox because, and a lot of it has to do with the injury to Aaron Judge because the American League is wide open. Yes, Tampa Bay, much respect to them, but even though they went through a bad year last year, they rebounded well, but they could be beaten in the playoffs. You can say this about all the other teams. Boston. I know they lost the series against Oakland, as we call them on the show, against Oakland over the weekend, but I still think they're going to be okay. They're going to make the playoffs. Out west, who wants that division? It looks like Seattle is starting to slip even further back. It's Texas and Houston. I still say whoever wins that division will represent the AL West in the playoffs. You're not going to have a wild card coming out of the division. So the American League is wide open. The sooner Aaron Judge gets back for the Yankees, their odds increase that much more for them to for their chances to increase
I heard
for them reaching the World Series. But until then, this American League is wide open.
I heard that. Yeah, I think that says more about the AL than anything. The fact that the AL's kind of, I said it earlier on Twitter, as I said, and that the AL's kind of mess. So that should tell you something right there. Now, as far as the West, I think you just mentioned it. The Mariners, I don't know what's going on with them. The pitching has not been very good, and I'm like, I need somebody to step up. Cal Raleigh, where the hell are you, dude? Rodriguez, where are you at? The
He's
pitching
been hurt.
I know, and also the pitching's been kind of meh too. So I don't know what's going on there. So it's Seattle. They got the Yankees coming up tomorrow, so they better try to figure it out because Texas and Houston are going to run away pretty quick. Now, speaking of Texas, they won 2 out of 3 against Baltimore, so they took care of business there. So that I think they're going to be right there in it. Houston. Like I said, I don't know if I believe in Houston. They lost 2 out of 3 to the San Diego, so I'm a little worried about Houston. So again, Seattle better figure it out. Now going to the National League, Atlanta. Look, we talked about it. You talked about it earlier, Sid. They did lose a tough series against the Yankees. I think the Yankees needed more that series more, I should say, than Atlanta did. Now Philadelphia, they took care of business. 8.5 is a big hill to climb, but they did lose 2 out of 3 to the Blue Jays, so that's not good. Although Schwarber did hit 2 home runs, so I guess that's not he's probably going to make kind of a late surge for the NL MVP, if you will. It's a 20-night game with multiple home runs since joining the Phillies back in 22. That's including the playoffs. The only other player with more multi-hit games in his first 5 seasons with any team. You got going back to 1940s and early, 1946, 1950 with Ralph Keener. So, he joins that pretty lately. It also includes Mark McGuire and Big Papi David Ortiz. So not a bad company to keep there. But yeah, bad series loss for the Phillies and the rematch of the 1993 World Series. Going with the theme here with the World Series rematches. Milwaukee, the Cubs didn't gain or lose any ground with them. They're right back to where they were, 5.5. They won their series, like I said, with Minnesota. Jacob Mizorowski, still, he struck out 10 batters yesterday. He only walked 1. The only 2 players to join that at age 24 younger get going back to not too far back, but Spencer Strider back in 23, and also Dwight Gooden back in 1984. So we'll see if hopefully his arm doesn't fall off with that. Now the Dodgers, they're not dodgering. They lose 2 out of 3 to Diamondbacks. They're 7.5 back. I know Dodger fans are freaking out, or they're already calling for Dave Roberts' job again. I think the problem with the Dodgers at this point is that they got to get their guys healthy. I think that's really going to be the key. Ohtani does not look right. I know he hit a home run over the weekend during that series, but they need to get their guys back. I still think they're going to win that division, but it's getting a little bit too close to covering for some Dodger fans' taste.
I know they got a couple of guys back, in particular Edwin Diaz, their closer. I know he blew a couple of saves in that series against Arizona. I think fatigue is starting to set in with this group as well. But if I'm a Dodgers fan, we talked about this over the last month. I'm not packing now. If their lead starts to get down to 3.5, 2.5, or heaven forbid 1.5, obviously you start to worry. But if you're a Dodgers fan, I'm sure you're annoyed because you're used to dominating your division. You used to sustain success and dominating everybody. As we said before the season starts, it's not about winning 100 games, 120 games. Get guys right, get guys healthy. Get guys healthy in terms of getting ready for another potential long playoff run, because it does take a toll on you, especially if you're an older player after a while. So if I'm a Dodgers fan, I'm not worried. But I know they start they're back at home. They start a series against Kansas City tonight. Now Tariq Skubal, who he looked okay in his debut last week against the Cubs at Wrigley. But heaven forbid that the Kansas City Royals pull off this upset tonight. Some of you other Dodgers fans, like you said, they'll be calling for Dave Roberts' head, which is not going. They're not going to fire Dave Roberts, so people need to back off of that. But yes, the Dodgers are going through it right now, but they've been there before. They'll right the ship. They'll win this division. Hopefully, they'll have their guys back in time for the playoffs. So that's what this year is all about for them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I know they've lost 16 to their last 21, but I think folks need to just chill for a second and take a beat. And look, we'll see what happens in the Skubal opener as a Dodger. Of course, as Sid said, Kansas City goes to the Dodger Stadium, so maybe this will be playing Kansas City could probably be what the doctor ordered for the Dodgers. We'll see. They start their series tonight. The rest of the series starts for today. You got Boston and Toronto, the Mets and Atlanta, Baltimore and the Twins, Philadelphia and St. Louis. The first game of that series will be on FS1 tonight. The Angels hosting Texas, Colorado, and Arizona. Milwaukee, they start their West Coast trip against San Diego. That'll be on ESPN Unlimited. Tampa Bay and the A's. Tampa continues their West Coast trip. Houston and the San Francisco Giants. They start their series as well. I don't know. I have 49ers on the brain. I don't know why, but
Other series that will be starting tomorrow. Big one in the AL Central. Cleveland will continue their road trip. They'll go to Detroit to face the Tigers. Pittsburgh and Miami. The Cubs at Washington. Seattle at New York to take on the Yankees. That opening series game tomorrow can be seen on TBS at 6:05 p.m. Central Standard Time. Other series they'll be starting tomorrow. The Texas Rangers will go on the road to play the Anaheim Angels. And the Colorado and Arizona will start, I believe, tomorrow as well. And that's your series they'll be starting today and tomorrow in MLB.
And also to your national TV schedule for this week on Wednesday, you got a doubleheader on ESPN. That Mariners-Yankees series, the second game of that series. Also, you got the Rangers and the Angels. That'll be the late game in that Wednesday doubleheader. Meanwhile, for Thursday, a special Netflix game will be the Twins and Philadelphia. That should be interesting. There we'll see how that goes. That does numbers wise and
that's the Field of Dreams.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see what happens and what the Rays will be, because we know that the home run derby didn't do very well with Netflix. So we'll see how the Field of Dreams games does here for that one. Just saying. So that's your schedule for this week. Earlier this week in MLB.
The Chicago Bears lose another star. We'll review the Hall of Fame speeches from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. An NBA legend passes away at the age of 36. And a special edition of Old School TV Monday will give a little clue as we travel through the world of music. I'm Sid, that's LeKeena. You're listening to Sports Zone Chicago.
10, 9, 8, 7.
Hey, it's your boy, the Superback, Sean Sierra, and be sure to follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms. On Facebook, Instagram, and our Roku channel, you can find us at Sports Zone Chicago. And on Twitter, we are at Sports Zone Chi. Also, be sure to download our mobile app so you can take Sports Zone Chicago with you on the go.
How do you take care of your mind health?
For my mental health, I meditate in the mornings.
I have my dogs. They're the best.
I just find ways that help me just relax.
Finding things that make me happy, like being close to my family.
I meditate a lot and read books.
I have hobbies outside of the game. I'm able to switch off. I'm able to turn my brain off from the game of basketball.
Your mind health matters.
Your mind health matters.
It's a romance sport. What? It's a romance sport like that.
Your Marine Corps' way of life is to defend the American way of life. Every day, no matter where we serve, we take a stand for our nation, for each other, for us all. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Everybody in a work zone is someone's somebody.
This is my mom. She works for KDOT.
This is my dad.
This is my mom.
This is my daddy.
This is my sister.
This is my daddy.
This is my son, Scott. He was killed while working in a highway work zone. When you drive through a work zone, drive like a life depends on it. Because it does.
Welcome back to Second City Sports, kicking off hour number 2 of the fabulous program on the Monday Extravaganza edition. I'm Sid, that's LeKeena. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80, that's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow me at Keena McGee on the Twitter, X, Keena again, IG.
As we kick off hour number 2, discussing the Bears in the NFL. If you have any questions or comments regarding the Bears or the world of football, as preseason week 1 kicks off, the games kick off later this week. If you have any questions or comments for us regarding the subject of football, you can definitely hit us up right now at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comment section. LeKeena will get the up on the screen for you.
Another practice, another injury as Luther Burden III, who many feel that could have a breakout season. Well, it's gonna take a little. You have to wait a little bit. He suffered a groin injury, at practice over the weekend. He is gonna miss the preseason. Now, I always say groins are like hammies. You don't know; they're kind of unpredictable. They could linger. So you hope that this is just maybe just rest and pain tolerance and stuff like that and treatment. Hopefully it's not going to be a lingering thing this season. But yeah, another tough injury for one of the Bears' top players.
Yeah, with the departure of DJ Moore via trade from the Bears to Buffalo, it left a spot wide open, a couple of spots wide open. Roma Duje is your quote unquote number 1. Luther Burden, the second year man out of Missouri, is your number 2. Of course, our free agent signing Khalif Raymond is your 3rd, the former Detroit Lions. So, and Xavier Thomas, the rookie on we'll mention here once again, he's your number 4 right now, who's been very good in camp thus far through the first couple of weeks. But with injuries like groins and hamstrings, you really have to be careful with those because if you come back to some re-aggravate those injuries, that could be the end of your season. So it's very smart for the Bears not to play Luther Burden in the preseason, even though it's down to 3 games instead of 4. Those injuries are tricky. You definitely do not want to mess up you don't want to mess up not just the trajectory for this season for Mr. Burden, but you don't want to possibly ruin his career as well. So this is a smart thing for the Bears to do to protect them, quote unquote, put them in a bubble because when the bell rings on September 13th at Carolina, you want him there fully healthy. We talked about what they're going through with Kyler Gordon right now. There's some things on both sides that the Bears and Gordon they weren't communicating on either side in terms of him coming back sooner rather than later with his various injuries. So you don't want another Kyler Gordon situation to pile up with Luther Burden or anybody else. So the Bears played it smart not to play him in the preseason.
Yeah, that's sort of like, and it was unfortunate because he was having a really good camp so far. So this definitely takes a step back a little bit. But again, look, I mean, this is sort of one of those things where you're hoping it's nothing that lingers. We know how tricky. We just said it, groins and hamstring injuries can be. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure you're going to want to perhaps maybe try to see if you can get him to a rhythm a little bit, before that game against Carolina on the 13th of September. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, unfortunately, this is kind of like the theme here with not just with the Bears, but I think this is happening a lot in the NFL going into the rest of the league. Another big injury. This time for All-Pro left tackle Laramie Tunzel. He had to have tricep surgery over the weekend. He's going to be gone for a specific period of time. They brought him in to protect Jaden Daniels' blind side. Unfortunately, he's going to be out for a little bit. So yeah, that's a big showing, especially when that O-line last year had a hard time keeping Daniels upright.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about them last Friday, and I didn't think we were going to talk about them this soon. But like you said, the left tackle position, as we talk about with the Bears and Caleb Williams, the left tackle position for a right-handed quarterback is very key because, like you said, with Texas blindside, also too, along with the center, they can make suggestions and calls as well. The line of scrimmage, they can tell the quarterback what they don't see, what the quarterback doesn't see. They're related to the quarterback. So, as you mentioned last year, the Commanders had a tough time protecting Mr. Daniels. Now, as we talked about last week on the show, with them bringing Stephon Diggs to fill in the shoes for Davey Samuel, who decided to go quote unquote back home to the 49ers. Yeah, that puts that much pressure on Jay Daniels and their running game as well for the Commanders. They're already going to be in the tougher division, in my opinion, coming up this year. You still have Philadelphia. You still have Dallas, despite what you think of them. And you have the new improved, on paper, at least, the New York Giants with their new head coach, John Harbaugh. So, if you fall too far behind this NFC East division, it's going to be another tough road to climb. You saw that last year with the injuries, not just to Jay Daniels, but to the other key players in Washington. Finished the year. They didn't quit, but they finished the year on the outside looking in. But if that happens again this year, Dan Quinn could be in a whole lot of trouble.
Well, another Dan that's having trouble while keeping his guys healthy, Dan Campbell, as we go to Detroit. Lions center Cade Mays suffered a fracture on his wrist in practice over the weekend and will miss a significant period of time. This is according to Ian Rappaport. He fractured a small bone in his left wrist, and looks like he could be out for roughly 8 to 10 weeks. This is on top of also them losing Isaiah Pacheco, who they just picked up from Kansas City, deal with the MCL. He'll miss some time too. So, I mean, I guess if you're embarrassed, right, you take solace in the fact that other teams are going through the same thing for the most part with injuries. But yeah, a couple of big injuries here for the Lions.
Yeah, I know many people are expecting the Lions to bounce back this year after missing the playoffs by 2 games last year. And they trailed the Bears by 2 games for that division title. They're the only team that beat the Bears twice last year. Yeah, Dan Campbell, he's behind his guys. I know that they've been more physical in camp this year than they have been in the past. I know that they have some guys they want to see in the preseason. I know they'll open up their preseason schedule this Thursday night against the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if Dan Campbell's going to keep his starters in. We'll see about that. But Detroit has a lot to prove. They got a lot of young guys that are coming in, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and in their secondary as well. So they still have a lot of work for them to do. Luke Altmaier, yeah, that name sounds familiar. If you're an Illinois fan, he's as of right now the new backup quarterback. I know they brought in Josh Dobbs, so there's going to be a lot of work to do between now and at the start of the season. So Detroit, there's a lot of pressure on them to get back to the playoffs. At least on paper, they have one of the easiest schedules in the league.
Yeah, one of the reasons why they're bringing on former Illinois QB Luke Altmaier is because Teddy Bridgewater decided to step away from the team in training camp and was officially placed on the reserve retired list ahead of yesterday's practice. They didn't really get into like why he stepped away, but that's one of the reasons why they did that. They brought on Josh Dobbs, and Altmaier is, I guess, right now is probably going to be the number 2 guy behind Goff. So interested to see what's gonna happen with this one. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see if this is the next the last we see of Teddy Bridgewater. We'll see what happens there. Now, as far as someone getting paid, well, Hunter Henry, the Pro Bowl tight end for the Patriots, he got a new 2-year extension worth $20 million, with $14.5 million of that guaranteed. $16 million extension, he'll get up to that as well. So he was really one of the top, one of Drake May's top targets, and went to the Super Bowl last year. So they get him locked in. He had 1 year left remaining on his contract.
Yeah, like I said, I was just trying to find the words for the New England Patriots right now. It's just like we already know it's going to be tough because remember, as you mentioned last year, they ran out to a 14-3 regular season, and they kind of cruised through the playoffs. And of course, they met that match with Seattle last year in the Super Bowl. Now, like so, you have new faces and new places, injuries. So cropping them not just with them, but with teams all around the league. With a couple of weeks into training camp, New England's going to face a tough challenge this year. You look at their roster; it's still a good roster on offense, but can the defense match the intensity of what they did a year ago. That's going to be a question. I know, of course, the whole Diana Rossini, Mike Vrabel foolishness is hopefully behind them, which I think it is. So you're moving on from that, but it's going to be tougher competition in the AFC. Is I'm not saying the division is going to be a bar burner, but Buffalo has gotten better on paper. The New York Jets seems to get younger, and they're going to improve. I'm not saying they're going to the playoffs, but they're going to improve. The only real bad team in that division is the Miami Dolphins. We all know they're starting to rebuild now. So New England, the lucky breaks that they had last year, they're not going to get some this year because they're going to be a target as well.
They do get yes, they did bring on AJ Brown. Of course, they got traded from Philly. They got Romeo Dobbs from Green Bay, and their schedule is going to be a lot tougher this year. Unlike last year, you probably say that they definitely benefited from the easier schedule. I'm doing the air quotes here for those of you who are listening. So it's gonna get tougher. I mean, look, they start playing Seattle right out the gate September 9th. Then they got to play the AFC North, and then they got to of course, then they got to play the Chargers, and they got to the Chargers again. They got to play Green Bay. So, and of course, the Bears too, October 22nd, and Week 7. So, yeah. So I'm a little skeptical about, but we'll get to it. We always get deeper in our divisional previews. But I'm a little skeptical about if the Patriots can repeat what they did last year, and it's going to be very tough. For all the reasons you said, Sid. I mean, that you got Buffalo playing in their new stadium. They, of course, you got the Jets. Yeah, they could. I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but they could probably improve a lot this year too. Miami, you probably say that they're kind of they're rebuilding. They got a whole new regime over there, so they're probably going to be rebuilding. So it's going to be very interesting to see the AFC East. That's going to be one of the intriguing divisions to watch.
And can Drake May repeat his MVP-like type of performance that he did around this time last year? We saw what happened to him last year in the Super Bowl, along with that offensive line, in particular tackle, left tackle Will Campbell. Can they start from scratch and repeat close to what they did last year? If they can, I think they'll be there. But it's definitely going to be a harder role for them this year. It's just the nature of the beast. You're going to get every team's best shot now.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to be definitely good. Excuse me, they're going to be one of the teams to watch as you listen to Second City Sports on Sports Chicago. LeKeena, McGee, Sidney Brown with you as we pivot over, say, the NFL, but also, of course, we're going to talk about the Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinement ceremonies, which just aired on Saturday afternoon. Excuse me, and probably, I think all 5 speeches were terrific. We'll start with Larry Fitzgerald's one. You saw how emotional he got after losing his father. I know that he tried to hang on, the last, for a couple of months, but unfortunately, but he did. He talked about the mentorships he had for the various points from Denny Green hiring him as a ball boy out in Minnesota for the Vikings. He did that for a few years. Of course, him going to Pittsburgh and. Of course, Arizona. He gave a shout out to fellow Hall of Famer Kurt Warner. Of course, they made it all the way to the Super Bowl, and his son Devin, his oldest son, who's a standout wide receiver over at Notre Dame, who presented him. I think that was definitely probably a very sweet speech by Mr. Fitzgerald. And Arizona's actually going to retire his jersey. So another very sweet moment there.
Yeah, you talk about class personified throughout his career. That's what Larry Fitzgerald was, both on and off the field. As we talked about on the show last Friday, I remember watching old film of him with the braids as he was the ball boy for the Minnesota Vikings back in the day. No one knew he was a future Pro Football Hall of Famer, but that's what his career turned into. Of course, he had a great performance in that Super Bowl back following the 2008 season against Pittsburgh down there in Tampa. Of course, his catch and run for the touchdown, one of the best catch and runs as a wide receiver for a touchdown in Super Bowl history. Of course, Arizona couldn't hang on because Antonio Holmes had something to say about that. But before Fitzgerald, he had a great career, as I mentioned, class personified. He wasn't a guy that got into trouble. He's an example of what young people should be, both on and off the field. And talking about his father, I saw a couple of those clips. As we talked about last week on the show, he was going to get very emotional in that he did, and he just reeks in a good way example of how a human being and a person should be in life here, but especially in the game of football. And I know you caught this, LeKeena, and I caught this on YouTube that he gave a little friendly dig to. He called him Uncle Chris Carter. He's like, since I'm officially retired now, now we both in the Hall of Fame. Just paraphrase a little bit. I got the best hands better than you, and we both in the Hall of Fame. It was a little a crack up there at the end. Chris Carter didn't take it personally. He takes a lot of things personally when he's on competing, and that's what you train as an athlete. But both of them shared a beautiful, humorous moment, and it was just overall a great speech, and the best speech of the day, in my opinion.
Yeah, it definitely. I think all 5 speeches were really good, but yeah, I know. Well, Chris Carr's known him since he was like 11 or 12, so yeah, he probably was just all in. Jesse could practically help raise him,
Mhm.
so of course he's going to take that. He's not going to take it personally now. Probably the funniest speeches. Well, look, we always say that there's that one guy that could have been a stand-up comic. I think Adam Vinatieri definitely could have been. Some of that stuff was a little bit too hot for TV. You probably say so. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, of course, 4-time Super Bowl champ and NFL all-time scoring record, currently the holder there. And yeah, he took some shots at his coach and of course Tom Brady and to Pat McAfee and some of the others, and even got his wife. Look, I guess his wife, is used to his humor. They've been together for years since I think they were in college. So that was kind of funny how that kind of started. But yeah, that definitely one of the funnier speeches of Saturday.
Yeah, if you Devin Hester, thank you for jumpstarting my career back in Super Bowl 41. But yeah, as we talk about all the time, you don't see NFL players marketing the way like Michael Jordan was in basketball and baseball players and other sports because their helmets are on the majority of the time. The only time you notice kickers, and special teamers, if they win the game or they miss a kick, and then they get ignored for the rest of the week. But these are the players like a Evan and Terry, like a persons that they are quiet but they lead by example in other ways. These are the times that they let their personality shine, and Anna and Terry took full advantage of it. I know some of it sounded like Def Comedy Jam, but we'll leave that alone. But we're seeing speeches like that, like John Riggins from the past. Let the personality show a little bit. We remember the late great Walter Payton. And of course, he had his son Jared up there. I remember watching that one live. He's like, I don't care who cried first. I don't care if I lost the bet. I love my son. He loves me. But Adam Vinatieri, you need some, like you said, you need that one person just to liven up the room a little bit. Not everybody has that it personality, that it factor. He had that, and it was very entertaining speech to say the least, without all the foul language.
Yeah, I believe it all. That kind of made it took us a whole nother level. Now, of course, Luke Kuechly, of course, won AP Defensive Rookie of the Year and also Defensive Player of the Year during his short 8-year career. Very, like I said, very funny, very poignant. His speech was, and I think this shows that quantity and not just a quality. I know some people thought that maybe he is now the second youngest to get into the Hall of Fame now, and of course he's going to be showing even more of his personality. Of course, he's the new top guy when Netflix does their NFL games coming up next month, actually. So we'll see We saw a little bit of preview of that in his speech on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought he used his platform for, because a lot of people are going to be watching him because this is his first time doing this as far as being on television. So it was a nice job of him using that platform for positive reasons to show his personality. But I think I just want to leave you with one question, LeKeena. I don't think I asked you this before, and this is no offense to Luke Kuechly, who deserved again. If he didn't have concussion issues, he definitely had a 10+ year career. But I don't want to ask you, and I already have the answer to myself, but I'll ask you. Do you think that he's this era's Terrell Davis / Gale Sayers?
Kind of.
Because
I
of their
thought about
careers
that.
being cut short.
Yeah, I thought about that too when he got in. I thought, okay, yeah, this is sort of like every, like, guess, decade, you can kind of say that there is that one guy, about what earlier the odds was Terrell Davis. You could probably say way back when, in I think it was the mid 70s, it was 76 or 77, I think that Sayers got in after a short career. Every decade, there's always going to be that one guy that like, okay, look, it's about and I said it's not about the quantity of but the quality, and for how many years he played. That 8 years, he had a lot of those. I just told you some of his accolades. So yeah, I think Kuechly is definitely, especially on the defensive side, because usually you don't see that on the defensive side.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he got it, I think he's going to break the mold for some of the guys that are going to be coming up. We'll talk about that in a minute here. But yeah, I think he's definitely going to be that guy that kind of like be the personified of, hey, you know what, you played less than a decade, but those 8 years he played, he was a hell of a player.
Yeah, like you said, impact is the key, and that's what Luke Kuechly did for that Carolina Panthers franchise when he played. Of course, you mentioned other stars like Steve Smith, a fellow Hall of Famer, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe future Hall of Famer who he played with in the beginning of his career, Cam Newton. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, among those stars, especially offensively, he stood out defensively. He was a leader, but on the off the field as well. And I hope he does well, with the Netflix gig coming up starting next month.
All right, next speech we have is Mr. Roger Craig, of course, who became the first player to get 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards catching, running. He was the first player to get that. Now he pre-recorded it, of course, a three-time Super Bowl champ with San Francisco. Now Jamie Williams, who was his presenter, I did not know this, but apparently they played together way back. I remember him playing when they played together at Nebraska. He only had 4 catches his senior year. We'll talk about Craig. So Tom Osborne, of course, they had the wishbone. So they unfortunately they didn't use him that much in in his senior year. But Bill Walsh, he was perfect for that. Now he did pre-record his speech. Of course, he made the announcement that he suffered from vascular dementia, and and that was I think that kind of took a lot of folks by surprise. But for the speech that he did show, he showed his humor, he showed his personality. You saw the pure joy that when he got in, when Ronnie Lott and Charles Haley welcomed him into the Hall of Fame. So it sucks that he had to wait like 25 years, but he made the most of
Yeah.
what it was worth the wait.
Yeah, strength and courage were the two words that came to my mind when I saw a couple of clips of that speech for Roger Craig. Like you said, he was treated like Chris Carter or some of the other play like the late great Ron Santo. That they waited
Mhm.
way too long to be elected to the Hall of Fame. As you mentioned, he was the first running back to have 1,000 yards receiving and rushing in the same year. And of course, we talk about Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, John Taylor, Brent Jones, and some of those offensive, Steve Young, some of those offensive stars, and rightfully so. But the straw that stirred the pot for that 49ers offense was Roger Craig back in the
Mhm.
80s. If it wasn't for him, those 4 Super Bowls would not be possible for the late great Bill Washington 49ers franchise. So maybe we still be looking at the San Francisco 49ers like the Cincinnati Bengals. When can they over when can they get over the hump? But that wasn't a crazy case, and Roger Craig finally gets his due. Like you say, he's still with us, so he's able to enjoy this. And so I'm glad that he is able to soak it in, because you wait for some players like in his stature, like we talked about with Steve Michael last year. They're on their way to heaven's door, and they're not fully able to enjoy it, or they pass away before they properly are recognized. So let's not take things for granted. Give people their flowers while they're here. Not to be Debbie Downer or anything like that, but I'm just glad that Roger Craig, after all these years, finally got the respect that he deserves.
Absolutely. And one guy who definitely deserves his praise and his flowers, Mr. Drew Brees, of course, last but not least, Super Bowl 44 champion, over 80,000 passing yards, of course, played 20 seasons. And his speech, I was a little bit, I'm not going to say I heard it. We heard it. He has a great personality. I think he actually called out a couple of guys. He was actually pretty funny, a little bit emotional. It was a little bit of kind of like a fusion of everything. And people don't realize, of course, his uncle is Marty Akins, who's a former, who's All-American over at Texas. Actually played with Earl Campbell, was a big part of why he won the Heisman back in the mid-'70s. So that kind of started that trend. And I'm a little surprised that Drew didn't talk about what happened with his shoulder. I guess he didn't want to get too emotional about it because he was already starting to get emotional with him, and of course Sean Payne, who presented him. But we saw a little bit of that personality, and I'm glad that with the Fox gig he has now. I know it didn't work out when he was at NBC, but he did show a bit more personality. Of course, work with Adam and me. I think that helps a lot too. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming up now. It's going to be doing a full year of it, starting on the 13th.
Yeah, consistency personified. That's what represents Drew Brees to me. Of course, he started out his career with the old San Diego Chargers. He was a backup to Philip Rivers, and then of course he injured his shoulder. And then you mentioned Sean Payton in that call that his injured shoulder, like he was supposed to be with the Miami Dolphins, but they didn't like his physical, and it had something to do with that shoulder. Of course, he went to New Orleans, so of course they made history, especially coming off the heels of Hurricane Katrina. They turned the image of that city and that franchise around, and so he's going to be remembered for that forever. And it's just that his consistency and the way he took advantage of the rules, like we talk about with Steph Curry all the time in the NBA with the 3-point revolution that we're in right now. Drew Brees, was one of the forefathers, in my opinion, that in the late 2000s into the 2010s that you took advantage uh, of the passing the passing yards and the NFL surpassed Happy League. He was one of the first quarterbacks, in my opinion, to fully take advantage of that. And his numbers reflected that. He was on winning teams with the Saints. Never got back to the Super Bowl, but with a healthy Drew Brees, the Saints were always competing for the playoffs and championship games almost every year. So, consistency personifies what I see Drew Brees as.
Yeah, and also I know he and his wife and their family still live down there in New Orleans, so we know that you saw how everybody we've seen you saw how everybody was how much they're beloved, that their family's beloved there. So and you saw, of course, Baylor, he's all grown up now, the little baby that he held after they won Super Bowl 44, beating Peyton Manning and the Colts that year. But yeah, that was actually a really sweet moment. He's all grown up now. He was only 8 months old. I'm talking about Bailey. He doesn't remember it, but you can tell that family is still beloved down there in New Orleans. Now, the first time eligibilities for next year's class, you got Gronk, you got Big Ben, you got Adrian Peterson, Richard Sherman, Cam Newton, and Antonio Brown, among others. You probably put Andrew Whitworth in there maybe as well, probably the most durable old lineman. So do you see any of those guys, coming in first ballot next year?
I think Adrian Peterson is a lock as far as first ballot Hall of Famer. Maybe Ben Roethlisberger. I think Andrew Whitworth would be the safe pick as the other first year lock as far as the Hall of Fame. I think, excuse me, those other guys will have to wait. I know part of it is because of what they've done off the field. Yes, you have players in there in the Hall of Fame that have done much worse. We don't have to get into that, but I think Richard Sherman, who has Hall of Fame credentials, he's going to have to wait a year or two. And the last person on that list, I forgot who you mentioned. Yeah, I think he's going to have to wait. I forgot the last
Oh,
person you mentioned. His name,
Antonio
excuse me.
Brown. Antonio Brown.
Yeah, he's the biggest one. Yes, he has the numbers, but for how his career ended and what he has not, what he's done or not done off the field following his retirement, he's going to have to wait a while. He's probably, in my opinion, he's going to have to wait the longest out of all those first year players.
Yeah, I think Gronk's going to be a fascinating one. I think it's sort of like we talked about it with Keegley just a few minutes ago. Like, will it be because of the fact that he didn't do it as long? I mean, it's going to be a little bit interesting, especially the way they they kind of set up, how they do it now. But look, I mean, he's got. I mean, look, he's got the numbers. I'm talking about Gronk does. So it's gonna get. He's got like 4 Super Bowls. He's got less than 10,000 receiving yards and only 92 regular season touchdowns over 11 seasons with the Patriots and the Bucks. He's got, I think, 4 Super Bowl rings. So I don't know. Gronk's going to be the most fascinating one, I think, out of all the guys on this list. The off the field stuff, I mean, look, I'm sure with AP and also Big Ben, remember he had his issues, his first few years. So that might give some folks an excuse not to put those guys in first ballot.
Yeah. But through the last half of his career and now through retirement, yeah, I'm talking about with Big Ben through this last half of his NFL playing career, and obviously through retirement, he stayed out of trouble. So I think that definitely helps him a lot if he's going to be elected first ballot. But with some of the other guys like Richard Sherman and Antonio Brown, I think that's going to weigh heavily on the committee as far as them being elected first ballot. So I think both those guys have to wait. I think Gronk, if he's elected first ballot, like I said, he has Hall of Fame credentials as well. But if Gronk is elected first ballot, it's because he's going to be basically he replaced Jimmy Johnson on the NFL on Fox. So, he has that pro wrestler type personality, has a fun personality. We've seen him in commercials in the last several years. Of course, he's on our televisions and laptops every week for Fox. So if Gronk gets in first ballot, it's going to be because he's in the media. Like you say, he has the numbers to back it up with the Super Bowl titles with two different franchises. But I think with him being involved in media, it was going to help him push him over the top. He's going to be elected first ballot.
Gonna be fascinating to watch as we get into the numbers, especially with the guys that have not gotten in yet. So yeah, we'll get to that of course as we do the semifinalists, the finalists, and the first round guys. All that stuff. We'll get to all that down the road later this year. Now we're going to take a really quick break. We'll remember one of the all-time great players and coaches and the greatest innovators. Also sticking with the NBA. Will the Bulls actually even be on national television? They're going to be a schedule release coming up. Well, I doubt it, but we'll have to wait and see. We got some more sports media news, and we go hip hop for Old School TV Monday. Well, we'll give you some solo hits all show long. We'll give you one more hit. It's honoring hip hop, so maybe with the schedule with the clues we showed you earlier. Maybe you guys will figure out what show we're honoring for Old School TV Monday. But we'll have that and so much more coming next. LeKeena, McGee, Sidney Brown, Second City Sports on Sports Chicago Sports Poll Reset coming up right after this.
Poof!
Hey, it's your boy, the Superback, Sean Sierra, and be sure to follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms, on Facebook, Instagram, and our Roku channel. You can find us at Sports Zone Chicago, and on Twitter, we are at Sports Zone Shy. Also, be sure to download our mobile app so you can take Sports Zone Chicago with you on the go.
Got it done here. Ouch! And we're gonna make sure you lit this time. Ouch! You're not gonna get me this time.
Ow, Manny!
Oops! Let's try an easy one.
Every day, we take steps to keep the people we love safe, but some health risks are easy to miss. Ticks hiding in the yard can spread germs, like the ones that cause Lyme disease. Mice searching for food can spread bacteria that makes us sick. Mosquitoes lay eggs in standing water and can spread West Nile virus and more. Cockroaches are drawn to water in the home, leaving behind allergens that can trigger asthma attacks. Common pests can threaten our health. Learn how to protect your family at pestworld.org.
Hey, this is Corey McGee, and I listen to Sean and Maya on the morning show.
City Sports and the hashtag Monday extravaganza edition of the program. You're locked and loaded, and we're live and living in color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. Sid the Kid is me. LeKeena McGee is she. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You follow Matt Keenan McGee on the Twitter, X, and the IG.
This is our sports potpourri segment. This is our last break of the show for today. So if you have any last minute questions or comments on the program, on the subjects that we talked about earlier today, from the Bears to the White Sox to the Cubs to the NFL, it's all right here. So if you have any last minute questions or comments for us, hit us up in the comment section right now at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comment section. LeKeena will get the up on the screen for you.
We remember one of the all-time great players and coaches, Don Nelson, passed away early yesterday down in Frisco, Texas, at age 86. He had been in hospice care for the last few months. He had been suffering from strokes. Of course, he was a five-time NBA champion with Boston. Of course, he coached the Bucks, the Knicks, the Mavs, and of course the Golden State Warriors. I'll get to my dros about those teams in a second, but yeah, of course he was an All-American at Iowa. Grew up in Rock Island, which is about a little further west of here, near the Quad Cities. One of the Quad Cities, and of course, he was actually originally drafted by the old Chicago Zipers. Now, if you don't know who that is, well, that franchise became the Washington Wizards. So, back in 1962, of course, after that team moved to Washington, he went to the Lakers, played there for a couple of years. Then, by 1965, he signed with the Celtics, where, of course, like I said, he won 5 championships playing with Bill Russell and that group, and Havlicek and them. And coaching career started back with the Bucks in 1976. Of course, he coached the Bucks from 76 to 88. Then after that, he left to go to Golden State from 88 to 95. Coach Chris Mullin, Mitch Richmond, and Tim Hardaway, the Run TMC teams, which I think should have gotten a chance to win a title, but I digress.
Me too.
Yeah, right. Of course, he went to the Knicks. He did that for a season. Then, of course, he coached Dallas, and of course, went back to Golden State to finish up his coaching career. Very fascinating, kind of a Renaissance man, if you will, Sid. But also his offensive. He didn't like being called an offensive guru, but his offense definitely kind of changed the way. He probably said that his offensive style definitely paved the way what it is today in the NBA.
Yeah, like you said, with his offensive philosophies, I said for a long time that defense was a curse word to him because he didn't believe in defense being your identity. He loved offense, and whether people thought he was stubborn or what have you, or he was quote unquote out of pocket, as the kids would say, he stuck to his guns. As you mentioned, his teams were successful in the regular season, but they weren't, as always, successful in the playoffs. Like I said, I'm not going to get too much on that 1992 Warriors team. I thought for a while there was going to be in that 92 season, it was going to be the Warriors and the Bulls in the NBA Finals instead of the Blazers and the Bulls. But that's a whole nother issue. Remember, earlier that season, the Warriors beat the Bulls at Chicago. So there were only a few teams to do that year. But I digress. But Don Nelson had great teams. You mentioned all the great players he coached. Those Milwaukee teams, they got to the breaking point, but just couldn't get over the Boston Celtics, except for, I believe, 1983. I believe they swept Boston out of the playoffs. I think it was in the first and second round back then before the playoffs expanded. But outside of that time, they couldn't get past the Celtics, of course, in the Eastern Conference back in the 80s. And, of course, you mentioned he moved over to Golden State. They had some good teams, but like you said, they cut the biblical core too short. Going into that 91-92 season, they traded Mitch Richmond to Sacramento. Even though they had a hell of a year that year, they lost to the upstart Seattle Supersonics, Sean Kemp and Gary Payton in the first round of the playoffs that year. Of course, that franchise wasn't the same ever since. Of course, they got back to the playoffs 2 years later without Tim Hardaway. Remember, he tore his ACL that year. Chris Webber won Rookie of the Year. Of course, him and Nelly had the issues the following year. He steps down. Chris Webber gets traded to Washington. But the New York Knicks was a very interesting move because everybody thought it was going to be the Warriors East Coast basketball. It didn't work out the way Patrick Ewing didn't like him. Of course, he got booted out. Jeff Van Gundy stepped in. The Knicks went back to their old ways. But You mentioned Nelly kept that and reinvented himself. He actually got the Dallas Mavericks franchise back on track thanks to Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash. They were on the cusp of getting to the NBA Finals a couple of times, but they just couldn't get over the hump. Remember, they were in that era of Kobe and Shaq with the Lakers in the early to mid
Mm-hmm.
2000s, and of course his coach career back to the Warriors. Everybody, especially many, not all, but many of you younger fans, go, "Oh, Steph Curry's first coach was Steve Kerr or maybe Mark Jackson."
Mm-hmm.
No, it was Don Nelson, folks. That team was in transition. That front office was in transition. I'm talking about when they drafted Steph Curry, and Steph Curry, I thought had a nice post. I don't know if you caught it on social media earlier today, thanking Don Nelson for being
Mm-hmm.
his first coach. But let's
Mm-hmm.
not forget, also too in the second stint with the Warriors, that 2017 they
Yep.
beat the Mavericks. His old
Yes,
coach
they did.
all four times during the regular season. I was
Mm-hmm.
one of them. I said, I think the Mavericks, remember that year, the Mavericks won 67 games. Dirk was named regular season MVP, not playoff MVP, folks. Do your search. But I thought that it was going to be an entertaining series, but I thought Dallas would have enough to get by. Well, the Warriors changed their game plan, made Avery Johnson and the rest of that Dallas team look like fools. The Warriors upset the Mavericks in a 1-A matchup
Mm-hmm.
in 6 games, and they almost took that to the Western Conference Finals, but of course, that year the San Antonio Spurs ended up winning the
Yep.
title. Of course, the Warriors lost to the Jazz, I believe, in 5 games in that next
Yep.
round. So they were entertaining teams to watch, and Nelly's teams would get close to the brink, but they just couldn't get over that hump because of other teams that were better than them.
Yeah, and I look at those. Starting with that Run TMC squad. I love those with Golden State. I love those teams. They should have gotten a chance to perhaps maybe I thought it was going to be Bulls and Warriors. I was cheering. I wanted Bulls and Warriors. I was cheering very hard for that matchup because I think that could have went 7, but again, I didn't get my wish. Orland had something to say about that, but yeah, it was kind of like one of those things where you're just like, oh crap, they should have gotten a chance to go over that hump. Now I do remember that squad you were talking about, and that '07 squad, of course, with Baron Davis, Monte Ellis, Jason
Mm-hmm.
Richardson, Andres Badun Bridges, and also Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes actually talked about that in his podcast. I saw him share that story. This is a little bit before Coach Nelly's passing,
Mm-hmm.
but he did talk about that and whatnot, how they were able to pull
Steven
off that.
Jackson too.
Yeah, yep, pull off that upset too. I think he was a 6 man off the bench. About Steven Jackson was, and I remember some of the, and I saw some of the various players that he coached. I saw Dirk, Dirk, talked about Nelly. I saw Steve Nash and his post. Of course, they were with Dallas. I also saw Steph's post from IG from earlier. He posted that this morning. Also Brent Berry too, because if you remember, Rick Barry, his dad, of course, the fellow Hall of Fame NBA player, was actually did a lot of television for Golden State for a while, and he and his brothers, of course, grew up around a lot of that, and they kind of like molded
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think he shared a couple of stories on his Twitter X account, and just to see the impact that Coach Nelly had on all the players, whether they played for him or not, I think just shows a testament to how beloved this coach was. Even his opponents, I saw Steve Kerr posted
Yeah.
something as well. So that was that. Of course, he took over after, of course, Nelly left the second time at Golden State. So to see how much he's beloved, and revered in the league, I think just shows a testament to what a great player and a great guy he was.
Yeah, and that's just a great personality on the court, but he was, like you say, he's a gentleman off the court as well. And let's not forget, if you remember, LeKeena, it's right here on YouTube for some of you younger fans out there. Type in NBA's dunks and basketball
Mm-hmm.
bloopers.
Yep.
If you remember, I think CBS did a story too at the time. I think this was, if my memory serves, this was Game 6 between the Bulls and the Pistons in 1990. I think this is on YouTube as well. CBS did a halftime segment on coaches' attire, and Don
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, remember he had that fish tie? He was a
Mm-hmm.
trendsetter in that.
Mm-hmm.
The designer. I know coaches don't wear suits now as of the last several years, but Don Nelson was kind of the forefront of the coaching movement in terms of
Mm-hmm.
designer ties. He had that famous fish tie. If you saw
Mm-hmm.
the volume 1 of NBA's dunks and basketball bloopers from 88, 89, they showed him with that fish tie as well. So he had
I
a
remember
little
that fish
debonair
tie.
personality as well. We talked about Chuck Daly and Pat Riley
Mm-hmm.
in their Armani suits and whatnot, but Nelly had fun with it, especially with those fish ties.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he loved those fish ties, and it was actually, pretty funny. Now, like you said, of course, they know after COVID, coaches stopped wearing suits and stuff, but yeah, he was definitely one of those trend-setting coaches in the league, and very well dressed, I would say, with those fish ties and such. So yeah, I mean, he kept reinventing himself after he left basketball. Of course, he had a successful dispensary business. I'm talking about once, of course, marijuana became legal,
Hmm.
he was actually able to make some money off dispensaries. And so I think his son and his daughter, I think they still, I think one of his older grandkids, they still run those because it's done very well out in California. So yeah, he was definitely one of those guys he was definitely one of the trendsetter Renaissance guy, and just like I said, always was able to reinvent himself. So he's definitely going to be missed by everybody in the NBA, and I'm sure they will do once the season starts. I'm sure they'll do some stuff to honor him. So rest in peace to one of the all time great coaches and
Yeah,
players.
yeah. Like you said, the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Golden State Warriors, I'm sure are going to honor him once, like you said, the season starts. And he let Bill Russell, as player coach in 1969, go out on
Hmm.
top
Hmm.
as an NBA champion as well. Remember, Don Nelson hit the a lucky shot from the free throw line
Yes, he
with
did.
the go-ahead basket in Game 7 of the Boston Lakers series from the old Great Western Forum. Everybody
Hmm.
thought that the Lakers were going to win that game handily. Well,
Finally,
Will
yep.
Chamberlain was injured, never was put back in the game, and
Hmm.
Boston took full advantage of that and sent Bill Russell out on top as player head coach with the championship in 1969. So,
Yep.
like I said, Don Nelson wasn't a superstar, but he was one of those players that did the dirty work, got the job done. And as you mentioned, he was a Renaissance man as head coach.
Yeah, I think people forget that he was the one of the stars because of course they had plenty of stars on that team, but he was definitely one of those like
Hmm.
uh you know he was definitely one of those guys off the bench. Like you said, he hit that big shot against the Lakers, the old Lakers, and yeah, I mean that I know that was their best shot to perhaps win those teams winning. I'm talking about the Lakers did that year, but like you said,
Hmm.
Chamberlain got hurt, and of course, that guy was all Boston after that, after he got hurt. So yeah, but that was a definitely a big part of those five championship teams back in Boston.
Yeah, so rest in peace to Don Nelson and peace and love to Don Nelson's family as we salute you here on Second City Sports in Sports Zone Chicago. You listen to the Monday Extravaganza against edition of the program. LeKeena has some sports media nuggets and news that she likes to share with the rest of the class.
Well, the NBA, it's almost NBA schedule release time, and of course, some of the matchups will be released during both the Good Morning America and the Today Show tomorrow. So set your clocks, your alarms on your phones or whatever early for that. Now, I guess the question is going to be, will the Bulls make any appearances national television? I doubt it, but in the off chance that they do, I don't think so. But I think you're going to see a lot of Philadelphia since now LeBron's over there over there now.
Hmm.
You'll definitely, of course, I'm sure the Knicks will have a lot, especially coming off a championship. So I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to seeing. Yeah, so I'm sure it's going to be a lot to go for without that one.
yeah, I think like you said, the Philadelphia, the Lakers for sure. Since Luka's back healthy again this year, Philadelphia, the Lakers, and perhaps like you mentioned, the defending champion New York Knicks. Still weird to say, but uh,
Mhm.
they're going to max out their appearances for national television games this year. Of course, just like the NFL, they have the flex schedule. If anything decides to change, they could drop them or add more games to the national television schedule. But it's going to be led by Philadelphia for sure because of the signing, a free agent signing of LeBron James, and of course the Warriors are going to get their appearances. I don't think they're going to get maxed out, but Steph Curry is still there, obviously, and you still have the other stars. Let's not forget too with San Antonio with Victor Wembanyama, especially what they did in the NBA Finals last year. Even though they choked it away to the Knicks, they're going to perhaps max out their national TV appearances there the league allows teams to have. So watch out for the San Antonio Spurs as well. You know that they're going to play on Christmas. Talking about all these teams that we just mentioned, the big time teams, since there are 5 NBA games on Christmas Day now. All those big time teams are going to play on Christmas Day, and you're just going to see overexposure at times from all these big time teams all year. Now bringing it back to Chicago, how many national television appearances they're going to get? I'll still say one. It'll probably be on Peacock or Amazon Prime as
Or
a
maybe Prime, probably
one
Prime.
of
That's
those
for
games that
most
will get buried
likely.
against Cleveland and somebody like that.
Yeah, it'll probably be on Prime. It'll probably be on Prime. I'm sure. I'm sure. Stan Van Gundy will probably be calling that game for the
You think you're
Bulls.
gonna bust out that pimp Santa Claus suit like you did
Oh
last
yeah,
year?
of course, of course, of course. He's gonna. That's gonna be his new. It's gonna be that's gonna be his thing now. So yeah, Coach Van Gundy's thing now. So yeah, I'll say two. I'll be nice to say they'll maybe get two appearances, but like I said, it's probably gonna be streamed mostly on Peacock and or Prime probably.
All right, you listen to Second City Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. LeKeena here with you. We still have a few minutes left before we close up shop and close it out with a special fun edition of Old School TV Monday. LeKeena, what else is on your mind that you want to let out of your beautiful brain of yours?
Well, this brain is a little bit. Well, I mean, I guess Lindsay Zarniak, who of course was a veteran ESPN host and reporter for a few years. She's going to be going to CBS, their CBS Sports headquarters, their streaming platform. She's going to be hosting some, doing sports updates and such. Her role might be bigger. Who knows? Of course, we know her. She's of course veteran at ESPN. Did it for a few years. Of course, she's been making the rounds, doing she has a book out now. She's doing the rounds. She was even on her husband Craig Melvin's the Today Show with her. A cute little interview that they did. So she's going to be doing her debut tonight at 6:30. So if you got CBS Sports headquarters on your on the Samsung or even on the web apps you got on your phone, you can check her out. But yeah, her role could be a little bit bigger over there at CBS. We'll see. But yeah, but right now she's gonna be doing sports updates. So but yeah, it could lead to more.
Yeah, of course. The last full time gig she had, it was at Fox for a couple years. I think it was right before COVID. She did. I think it was right afterwards. I think it was afterwards, if I'm not mistaken. She did the NFL on Fox. So as far as the sidelines are concerned, she did a great job. But I think you remember this too, LeKeena, back 21 years ago, as the late George Michael sports machine, as he was getting ready to retire. She replaced George Michael. She started to co-host with him during those last couple of years, and so on. And then she took over for a bit before they closed out shop. I remember seeing her there first. Of course, no one knew she would turn out to be a big giant in the industry. But I remember her watching her a couple of decades ago. That she co-hosted the George Michael Sports Machine the last few years of that program.
Yeah, I think I remember that. I think they showed clips of that. But yeah, so she's definitely come a long way from that. And like I said, I don't think anybody thought that she'd be as big of a star as she has become. So yeah, so we're gonna be seeing her again on CBS headquarters. And look, I think it's like I said, this could be leading to more. We'll see.
Yep. Any other news? Before we get to other news and nuggets about the rest of the sports media world, I just want to give the NFL schedule at least for Thursday's games. I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit on Friday. As we mentioned, football is back. We saw the Hall of Fame game last week between uh, Arizona and Carolina. I'm sure the ratings were decent for that. But here's the schedule for just the Thursday games only, since our next episode will be on Friday. We mentioned about the Lions and the Bengals earlier. That's at 6 o'clock on Thursday. The other games that are scheduled for Thursday: Green Bay at the Steelers. I don't think we'll see Aaron Rodgers play. I think that's a safe bet. He'll go back into his cave. The Indianapolis Colts in the New England Patriots. The Los Angeles Chargers in the Houston Texans. The Arizona Cardinals in the Las Vegas Raiders. They'll be on ESPN Unlimited and on NFL Network Live on Thursday. The Tennessee Titans and the San Francisco 49ers. That's just preseason schedule for Thursday. We'll give you the rest of the schedule for week one on Friday when we commence. Any of those games are you looking forward to on Thursday? At least checking around. At least.
Yeah, I might peek in the Green Bay Pittsburgh game just because, like I said, I think Aaron Rodgers. You won't see him on the field, obviously, but I'm sure he'll be there. So I'm wondering how the we'll be interested to see what happens, if anything, in that contest. Indy, New England, they should be interesting. Detroit, I mean, you probably won't see a lot of them, we'll see how much we see of Mr. Fernando Mendoza in his debut. He might play maybe a couple of series over there against Arizona. We'll see. Tennessee, San Fran, like I said, you probably won't see a lot of their guys either. So, I think that's really going to be the key is going to be like who plays and who doesn't. I think that's what people are going to be looking out for this one.
Yeah. Yeah, because like we said before, that it's now down to 3 preseason games instead of 2. Some teams use week 2 of the preseason as their dress rehearsals. Others maybe the last preseason game since it's down to 3 now. We'll see what happens there with some of these teams. I'm interested in the Titans 49ers contest only because remember Kyle Shanahan was in a car accident a couple months ago and he's still recovering. And the 49ers, so this will be their first game since his car accident. I'm sure they're eager just to get out of their training camp facilities, just to release some emotions in a healthy way and go out there and play football. On the flip side for the Tennessee Titans, it'll be the debut of new head coach Robert Saleh. I want to see how his team, especially his new defense, is going to come out with a new attitude.
Could be very interesting to see what happens. Now, speaking of, you asked about the Rays for last week's Hall of Fame game between the Panthers and the Cardinals. 7 million people tuned in to that Hall of Fame game on both NBC and also on Peacock. It actually is the most watched Hall of Fame game since 2021. So somebody watched that Hall of Fame game.
I'm not surprised. Football's back.
Yeah. I mean, and also it also helped too that the game was actually pretty exciting. It wasn't kind of like just your run of the mill like Hall of Fame game. It was actually back and forth for a bit. Of course, Haynes King, of course, the rookie QB for the Panthers, of course, helped win that for them at the end there. But yeah, so there's a reason why people say why they should Hall of Fame game. Well, you now you know why.
Yep. There's nothing else that need to be said. As I said, football is back, and like I said, it was a surprisingly competitive game without the major stars on both teams. You saw them staying on the sidelines, and like I said, you got some action. So that's what football fans want, and they got it.
All right, so let's go to old school TV Monday. We go.
Yes.
If you haven't been following all the clues we've been saying all show long. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but yeah. So say you take it away for this week's edition of Old School TV Monday.
This week's edition of Old School TV Monday will dive in full deep into the music world and salute Yo MTV Raps. That's right. Yo MTV Raps was a hip-hop music video program which first aired on MTV Europe from October of 87 till December of 1990, and here in America from August of 1988 until August of 1995. Remember, last week it celebrated its 38th anniversary of its premiere. The American version of the program, created by the late Ted Demme and Peter Doherty, was the first hip-hop music show on the network and was based on the original Europe show. Yo MTV Raps produced a mix of rap videos, interviews with his rap stars, live in studio performances on Fridays at the time, and comedy. Your hosts were Dr. Dre and Ed Lover in 1989 into 1990, but first it was hosted by Fab Five Freddy. If you remember, he was in a music video Rapture performed by Blondie back in 1981. The weekday version was dubbed Yo MTV Raps Today, which debuted on March 13, 1989. Ed Lover created his own dance called the Ed Lover Dance, which is hilarious, by the way, which typically was featured on the Wednesday episodes that became somewhat popular in the 1990s. The Ed Lover Dance was performed to the track The 900 Number by artist The 45 King.
Yeah, and also, too, for those who don't know, Demi and Ed Lover actually went to high school together out in New York, back in New York City. So that's how their connection started there. They started way before that. Now, Dr. Dre, no, not that Dr. Dre. This Dr. Dre, of course, was a radio personality. Was MTV VJ before, of course, started hosting Yo MTV Raps. And it was definitely one of those shows that I think people forget that it actually it did start in Europe. This was before that became successful. So they said, look, let's do one here in the United States. And hip hop was starting to take off by the late 80s, of course, with Kumo D and, Grandmaster Flash and, of course, Run DMC. I think that KRS-One, of course, those were the kind of like, that started that trend of, okay, let's have because remember, for some reason, hip hop was, like a nasty secret for MTV. They didn't want to show, they didn't even want to show rap videos back then. So once rap started, becoming more mainstream and becoming very popular, now I think MTV realized here in the States anyway that okay, you know what? Yeah, maybe so that's how Yo MTV Raps started.
Yeah, and also too, you saw the who's who in hip hop at the time, including Eric B, Rakim, KRS One, Young Redman back then, Method Man, Wu Tang Clan, Special Ed, Eric Sermon, Chubb Rock, Craig Matt, RP to him, MC Search at third base, and Large Professor. Don't forget, Salt and Pepper was part of that first episode as well
Mm-hmm.
Of Yo MTV Raps, and of course Queen Latifah before she started living single, she would regularly appear on that program. Moni Love, so the who's who of hip hop came to Yo MTV Raps to promote their songs. And during the last few years, when that show was hosted by Ed Lover and Dr. Dre, they were those artists were allowed to perform their songs live. They weren't lip sync like they were when they were on Club MTV the first couple of years, or Soul Train or American
Mm-hmm.
Bandstand. They actually performed those songs live. The only other national outlet that at the time that hip hop artists were allowed to perform their songs live without lip sync was the Arsenio
Garcia
Hall
Hall.
show. But
Yep.
uh, uh, but also too, they allowed other celebrities to come on their show to be interviewed, like Spike
Mm-hmm.
Lee, Bill
Mm-hmm.
Cosby. Yes, Bill Cosby was on there for a minute, and of course the late great Godfather of Soul, James Brown.
Yeah, I remember that episode with James Brown. Also, too, of course, LL Cool J. That was one of the very first time he performed was on Yo MTV Raps. I think people forget.
Mm-hmm.
People forget that. Remember before he became, of course, an actor and and such. Music was really his first. It still is his first love. So that was his kind of first foray into performing live. Of course, De La Soul, Public Enemy, NWA. So I think a lot of those, you kind of like you said, a who's who of hip hop and rap stars, started on this vehicle here, and it kind of it paved the way for BET's Rhapsody that would come on in '95, about 6 or 7 years later, and some other shows as well. But yeah, and of course, when it had its series finale back in '95, of course, a lot of those guys we mentioned, of course, KRS One, Rakim, Redman, Method Man,
Mm-hmm.
Chubb Rock, Craig Mack, and Salt and Pepper also too. That kind of ended that. Of course, there wasn't, they did do another one back they repackaged it, in 1996. That was, hosted by, I believe, Angie Martinez and Fat Man Scoop. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long. It came on like late at night on Fridays. It only came on weekly. I know
Mm-hmm.
Paramount Plus tried to do a newer version back in 2022. It didn't take off. So I'll have to imitate, never duplicated, but you can never beat the original of Yo MTV Raps. And some of the episodes are on YouTube, so if you guys want to relive some of those memories, it's right there.
Yes.
Some of them.
And that's also on Pluto TV as well. I just remember real quick, LeKeena, I remember watching those episodes. That my mom had cable back then, and I was very limited on how many hours I would watch her TV, because the living room. I'm sure this was your situation, like in many others. The living room was the choice for cable television, and your parents were in control, and rightfully so. But I remember when it came on daily. Obviously, I couldn't watch it every day because I had homework to do. But I usually would catch up on the weekends until, like you said, in the early '90s, uh, they moved the weekend programs to late at night. But I remember watching the Fab Five Freddy edition on the weekends to catch up what was going on in hip hop. And of course, I did get a chance to see a few episodes of Ed Lover and Dr. Dre throughout the years of that program until it closed down in '95. They were funny together. Of course, they had a movie called Who's the Man. You
Yes.
could check that out on some streaming services. I think here on YouTube as well. But they're a funny duo, and they had a sidekick that did jokes and parodies of various artists and celebrities. It was very funny. And one other moment I want to close out with, not to be negative here as we close out this show, but remember when Tupac Shakur was on that program?
Mhm.
He was promoting, I believe it was Poetic Justice with the late great John Singleton. And of course, one of them asked a question about remember, Tupac was supposed to be in Menace to Society, but there's some stuff that went on behind the scenes that he didn't get the role. He started running off at his mouth, and Ed Lover tried to basically told him to shut up. Tupac went off the rails. Of course, he got put in jail for it because the feds used that interview from Yo MTV Raps and used that as evidence in court, and Tupac got in trouble. But they had some iconic moments on that show, and also too, remember when Ice Cube decided to go solo, he brought the raps.
Yeah. So, and also, like I said, I was fortunate. I actually had a television in my room. I was actually one of the few, probably one of the few people I knew that had a television in my room. So, my parents, my mom for the most part didn't really care what I watched as long as it looked. Don't repeat it, out loud or whatever. And then it's like whatever. That's not, she wasn't strict when it came to that. So whatever. But look, as far as Dr. Dre and Ed Lover is concerned, I believe Ed Lover is still doing a radio show out in New York City. He's still doing that. I know Dr. Dre, I know he's had some health issues, but he's still doing his thing as well, doing some radio and podcasts and such. So I think I just saw a clip of Ed Lover's podcast recently. So yeah, so they're still active and they're still around. So if you guys want to check those out, you can. But yeah, those moments are always iconic and I always say that those are type of shows where Yo MTV Raps walks so that Rap City and Willow Six Park, both shows we already done for Old School TV Monday. This kind of like epitomizes what led to those shows. So this is sort of like the kind of like the start of those particular shows.
And you can also check out the Yo MTV Raps documentary that was produced by VH1 back in 2005. You can watch that episode right here, full episode right here on YouTube as well. So for this week's edition of Old School TV Monday, we salute the 1990s music program Yo MTV Raps. LeKeena, take us home.
You follow LeKeena McGee on the Twitter, excuse me, the IG.
You can follow your Shirley Sidney Brown on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80. Be sure to download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from 12:15 to 2:15 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on Sports Zone Chicago. One more again, as the kids would say. Be sure to catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from 12:15 to 2:15 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
And if you missed our segment talking about, Yo MTV Raps or other shows that we did for Old School TV Monday, and also if we missed an interview that we do when we do our NFL picks coming up next month, don't worry, you can catch the replays anytime, anywhere on Sports Social College, specifically in YouTube channels. You can catch replays of our show, Sean Sierra Sports, the Smoke Fellas, and so much other great content. Catch it anytime, anywhere on Sports Social College, specifically YouTube channels.
And we will provide.
All right, so we'll have the Chicago Sky, of course, they're back at it tonight. They face Seattle. I believe. Let me look it up real quick here before we go. I believe that game is on television. It's on the USA Network. It's also so it's also gonna be on USA Network. So if you guys want to check that out, you can. We'll leave the other stuff out of it, but we'll have some football to talk about. We'll preview some Bears, and we'll also be doing our divisional previews coming up within the next week or so. So make sure you guys get ready for that as well. We also have a big special guest talking Bears football coming up on Friday. Who that is? Well, you'll have to come back and join us on Friday just to find out. So for Sid, I'm LeKeena with Second City Sports on Sports Chicago. We'll see you guys on Friday. Be safe out there, folks.
Go Sox! Holla!